Welcome to the Oxford Clay Pottery Podcast. I'm Catherine Tomlinson and I started an eco conscious pottery company called Oxford Clay. Now, Oxford Clay, I don't just make pottery, I also make books and courses for other potters who want to be more environmentally friendly in their pottery making. And that's what this podcast is all about. And I can't wait to get started. Let's go. Hello, welcome back to the Oxford Clay Pottery Podcast. I'm your host, Catherine Tomlinson. Thank you so much for joining me here today, back on the series, the 10-part series of me making a mug, showing you how I make a raw glazed mug on the potter's wheel. In today's episode 3, and today's episode, we're going to be pulling a handle. So, want to show you that this is definitely something that you can do. If you've never pulled a handle before, you absolutely could do it. And if you want to see how this is done, you can always watch like the YouTube version of this podcast episode. So, this will be, if you're listening on the podcast, this is the audio of it. But if you wanted to see how it's done, yeah, just click on the link in the show notes and you can watch the video. And yeah, let's get on with the episode. Hello, welcome back to the Oxford Clay Pottery Podcast. So, in this episode, we're going to be making a handle. We're going to be like pulling a handle for our mug. So, what do we need for this job? Basically, we need some clay. We need the clay to be really, really well wedged. Really, really well wedged is like kind of maybe, or kneaded if that's what you call like wedging clay. So I've been like wedging this for about 3 minutes, 4 minutes, and it's really, really important when making handles to make sure that your clay is like really, really well wedged, because you really don't want any kind of like lumps of like harder clay in there or softer clay. So it needs to be really well wedged. You definitely don't want any air bubbles in there, and it really helps. That will really help to like make a really smooth handle. Okay, so just wedging this a little bit more. I can feel it's really well mixed and it's really, really smooth, which is fantastic. The next thing we need is just like a bowl of water. And that's what we're going to be using to, when we make our handle, we're going to be like pulling the handle. We need lots and lots of water for this. So got a nice bowl of water. And then we need something to put the handle on when we finish pulling it. So I just got like a tile, which is really like a really good thing to use because it's really, really flat. You can use any flat surface. I've seen people like hanging handles off like tables. I've seen them like, making them straight onto tables. You can make it on like a board of wood, or yeah, the floor. Any flat surface you can kind of use to kind of make your handle, to store it on until it's dry enough to then put on your pot. Because that's what we're doing. We're basically going to make our handle, we're going to set it in the shape that we want it, on the pot, and then we're going to let it dry to the point where it's like the same dryness as the pot is. Okay, so let's get going. My first top tip is not to use like too much clay. Like I've been, making handles for a while, and what I used to do when I first started making handles, like pulling handles, is I used to use like quite a big like piece of clay, and I used to spend absolutely ages then kind of smoothing it and pulling the handle. But then I realized that you don't actually have to do that. You can make a quite a like a sort of small roll of clay and then just pull it to kind of get, pull it. We're going to be shaping it really with the kind of pulling handle action, and that's what we're going to use to make the sort of beautiful shape. But we don't necessarily need to like kind of pull that clay into like a sort of thin handle over a long period of time. In fact, it's probably better that we don't do that, because the clay can get like really overworked like really easily. Like I was saying to you when I was talking about like making the pot on the wheel, the clay that I use is very susceptible to getting overworked. So really, the less time we spend with water on it, pulling it, the better. And this clay is like just kind of normal soft clay in terms of like the consistency of it. And The thing a really good thing to say at this point as well actually is that it's worth making a few handles, and because, like, even if you've just got, like, 1 mug, because quite often their handle will kind of, like, go wrong. It just gives you some margin for if one of them cracks or, as in the making process, sort of sometimes they can crack as they're drying a little bit, in that curve around the kind of the handle curve. Um, Even though we're going to be setting it in that point to try and minimize the cracking that will occur, it is a good idea to have a few different ones in case like one goes wrong. So yeah, so maybe we'll make perhaps we'll make maybe like two or three today. Okay, so I've picked off a piece of clay and I've kind of just kind of shaped it with my hands into a kind of sort of, like a sausagey shape. And this clay is, okay, it's 5 ounces, which is also milliliters, no. It's about 100, it's 147 grams, about 150 grams of clay, of wet clay. So, okay, what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to roll it on the floor on a nice flat surface to get it really, we want it to be really sort of even shaped all the way down. So let's do that first. I'm just literally rolling the clay on the floor, few little bits in the way. Don't want that. Um, and we want it to be quite thin because, like I said, we don't want to spend ages and ages like smoothing the clay out. So you can see already that clay's gone really long. It's actually probably twice as long as we need to make the handle. So what I'm going to do at this point is I'm actually going to chop it in half just with my hands. And then what we'll do is we'll make the handle from those two bits. Yeah. So, in terms of the diameter of this, it's probably maybe like a couple of centimeters wide. Get my ruler, have a look. Yeah, so it's about, yeah, at the moment it's about 2 centimeter wide kind of sausage. And let's get going with the kind of the smoothing process of pulling a handle. Okay, so the essence of pulling a handle is basically you're holding it with one hand, whatever hand feels good to you, and then we're holding it over a bowl of like water, or bucket of water because it's kind of like going to be like dripping lots. And then you take your other hand, and essentially what you're doing is you're literally just putting water on that handle and you're just smoothing it in a shape that you want. So, you can do it like however, sort of like sometimes your hands will just like want to do it in a natural way. Like, if it feels better to like squash it a little bit with your thumb kind of thing, like you can do it like that. Um, and what I do is I basically just shape it so that it's kind of a bit flat. I quite like handles that are a bit flat. Some potters will leave a kind of like a kind of thicker bit at the top of the handle to kind of attach it to the pot. And that does look really nice actually. And then they'll have it kind of quite thin all the way down. So don't want it to be too thin. Made very thin handles and they can actually be really uncomfortable to like hold. But I quite like having a handle which is like almost like a kind of, what would you call it, like a sort of like an oval shape, like a squashed kind of oblong shape. And then also what you can do as well is you can get your hand and you can do like a kind of ridge down the middle of the handle. That looks quite nice. Okay, so that's enough, I think. I don't want to overwork this clay. So literally just been shaping it just for like, what was that, like a minute or two or something. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just set it in the position that I want the shape to be on the side of the mug. So gonna do that because if you have your handles sort of hanging off a table, this is what I've done in the past, basically, just kind of attach them all onto a table and they're just hanging straight. When you come to try and curve them round, some clays really don't like that, and they'll just crack the bit where you've curved, and especially this clay. Especially this guy, it's like, yeah, it's very susceptible to doing that. So what I found the best thing to do is to kind of set it in the curve, and then it can dry in that curve. So what I'm doing is I'm holding it with one hand. I'm just taking my other hand like behind it to like support it from the other side. I'm just taking it and I'm going to shaping it into like a curve shape, maybe like sort of like a half moon shape, and I'm going to stick that on the pot. Yeah, you can sorry, on the tile as if it was going to go on the pot, and then the other one just rests. The other length of the clay just literally rests on the tile. So you can, it's as if you were going to kind of like stick it onto a pot, the side of a pot. You're basically like pressing one side down, like the top of it. Say like if you were going to stick it on the side of a pot, the top section, you just stick that directly on the tile as if the tile was the side of the pot or whatever you're making it on, and then you just lay the rest of it down. So you kind of get a bit like a sort of I don't know, like a kind of, is that like a question mark type type shape? Um, yeah, so you got it there, and then you can just dry it. Because we haven't overworked this, it's not going to take too long to dry. And then what we'll do is, in a minute, I'll show you when this is leather hard. I'll show you like how to attach it onto the pot. So yeah, I'll make another one. So in exactly the same way, just got the other half of that thing of the length of clay that we used for like the yeah we just rolled out. That's quite good to know actually that like about 150 grams of clay makes two handles. This one's a little bit thicker. So just going to smooth it a little bit more. I keep finding like little bits and bobs in the clay, like little sorry, when you reclaim clay, you can get like really like weird little bits, like little bits of sponge and stuff in it. Like, oh no, I don't want that in my clay. So again, just like smoothing it a little bit. This one's a bit thicker at the end. So the action for this is you don't want to be so although it says like, pulling a handle, you're not really pulling it. You're literally just kind of very gently smoothing it because you don't want to pull the clay sort of off the bit that you're holding in your other hand. You're literally just kind of smoothing and shaping, smoothing and shaping. This needs to be a little tiny bit thinner, I think. Just kind of carry on like smoothing, shaping, smoothing, squashing it down. So it's like a nice kind of oval. I don't know how to describe this shape, kind of like an oval oblong shape. It's not round, it's kind of like a squashed round. Uh, that makes sense. Not. Uh, okay, there we go. Yeah, and I'm just making sure because I'm going to be holding that handle when I drink my tea, so I don't want any like sharp like edges. You can really sort of dig your thumb in and make a really nice groove in the middle of the handle, kind of to make a pattern. But like I'm always conscious of it. Oh, I want it to be still really smooth because I'm going to be like holding that. Okay, I can feel that that's getting a little tiny bit overworked, so I'm just going to stop there. Um, okay, and then again, I'm just going to put it on my tile in the shape that's going to be on the pot. So again, I'm just taking the top of it. I'm supporting, yeah, with the hand I'm already holding it with. I'm just supporting the back of it into a curve, and I'm going to just be pressing it down as if I was attaching it to the pot, and then just kind of laying it down, just making it into the curve like that. So we've got two handles, um, and they're going to, yeah, they just need a little bit of time to dry, and then I can attach them to the pot, and I'll show you how to do that. So just to say, like, it's a really good idea to make handles before you start like trimming or turning your pot. So what you can do is make a couple of handles or three or whatever, however many handles you need, just make them, and then you can trim or turn your pot. I call it turning, where you're kind of making a really nice base on your pot, and then by the time you come to, because that can take a little while, by the time you are finished doing that, then your handles will probably be dry enough and you can attach them onto your pot. And just to say, if you're in a real rush and you really need to like dry your handle really fast, you can do that with in some pottery sort of studios, they have like a heat gun, but you don't actually need to use a heat gun. They take loads of energy. You don't need to, you don't need to do that with like a hairdryer. You don't really need to use either of those two things. You can literally just use a desk fan. They don't really use very much energy at all, and they will have a really good drying effect. And they dry a little bit slower, which is quite good because you don't want it to dry like too fast with loads of heat, because they'll probably, they will be liable to like crack and stuff. So yeah, as you're drying them out, just make sure they're not kind of like sort of, make sure they're kind of straight down, like you don't want them drying in like a skew whiff position. Um, yeah, great. Okay, so there we go. We've got two handles, and then we'll come back and we'll attach them to the pot when I've turned the cup. Thank you so much for joining me on that episode. And if you want to find out more about eco-friendly pottery, head over to the Oxford website, which is www.oxfordclay.co.uk. Can't wait to see you there.